Hello, Madden community, and hello, Apex Madden League. It's your boy, Big Al, aka Ferreira Sr., and I'm back with another podcast, The Franchise, Episode 2 for the Apex Madden League. And let me tell you, so far it's been great. We've had a few bumps in the road, what leagues don't, as Alpha's mentioned on his podcast, The State of the League. It's been fairly good vibes, and surprisingly enough, considering where we are in the cycle, we picked up a few new players who've done well and have been supportive, and even some of the guys on the wait list have also done the same. And that's what it's about. It's a community of people who want to play the game when they can play it in their adult lives and try to have fun with it. So on today's lineup, what I have is we're going to talk about the team leaders, the player leaders, the rookie leaders, league standings, Daddy League power rankings. We're also going to talk a little bit about the Apex Prime game review that took place last night, courtesy of Alpha Heel, who's done a great job on the production, as he always does. Want to learn from that so that I can go ahead and start doing those for us as well. So, and then we'll go ahead and take it out of here. So, with a little bit of a break here, just a second, we'll get to the team leaders. So next up on the Franchise Podcast, we're going to talk about the Apex team stat leaders. And starting off with the offense, as we always do, total offensive yards per game. Leading the way here in the top five is the Washington Redskins with 444. Behind them is Arizona Cardinals with 371. The Tennessee Titans sit in third with 364. Behind them, 10 yards, is the Kansas City Chiefs at 354. And finishing out the top five is the Miami Dolphins with 350 yards per game of total offense. Moving the ball through the air, passing-wise, the Kansas City Chiefs lead the way with 301 yards. They're the only team right now with 300 yards per game. Tampa Bay Buccaneers shy of that at 270. Behind them is the Dallas Cowboys at 268. Tennessee Titans sit fourth at 253. And just below them is the Washington Redskins in the top five at 252 yards passing per game. Finishing up the offensive side with the rushing yards per game on the ground. Once again, another team that's just dominating the Apex Madden League is the Washington Redskins at 191 yards on the ground per game. Cincinnati Bengals behind him in second at 163. San Francisco 49ers at 135. Baltimore Ravens at 124. And finishing the top five is the Arizona Cardinals with 122 yards per game on the ground. Turning the ball over to the defensive side for the total defensive yards per game given up, and that goes to the Los Angeles Rams with 180. Behind them is the Green Bay Packers at 196.7. Those two teams are both holding offenses under 200 yards. In third is the Jacksonville Jaguars at 235. The New York Jets at 256, sitting fourth, and finishing out the top five defensive total yards per game is the Minnesota Vikings at 267. Passing, giving the ball up in the air defensively, the Rams have only done it 117 yards per game. Pittsburgh Steelers at 142. Green Bay Packers at 152. Arizona Cardinals at 177. And the New York Jets at 181, giving up the yards in the air for passing on defense. Finishing up the defensive team stats will be the rushing yards on the ground and holding it true to their defensive style, and that is the Packers at 44 yards on the ground. So they're a wonderful team that's in all three stats, just as the Redskins are, and those two get together, that's going to be a good one. Carolina Panthers at 51, Jacksonville Jaguars at 52, Los Angeles Rams at 62, and the Washington Redskins defense holding them on the ground at 68 yards per game defensively. So next after this, we'll go ahead and talk about the players that are leading the Apex Madden League here in just a second. All right, moving on to the players that are leading the Apex Madden League thus far. We're moving into Week 8 tonight into advance into Thursday. So we're currently finishing up Week 7. And here's how the player stats sit right now. Passing the ball offensively, leading the Apex Madden League is Patrick Mahomes of the Kansas City Chiefs with 2,241 yards. Dak Prescott with 1,991. Dwayne Haskins Jr. of the Washington Redskins with 1,874. Jameis Winston of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with 1,777. Aaron Rodgers with 1,613, finishing out the top 5. Running the ball on the ground, leading the way by far is Darius Geis of the Redskins with 1,025 yards on the ground. Currently the only rusher at 1,000 yards right now, but not too far behind is Joe Mixon of the Cincinnati Bengals with 970. Melvin Gordon in third with 648, far distance behind those two. Leonard Fournette with Jacksonville at 628, and Matt Breida of the San Francisco 49ers with 557 yards on the ground, finishing the top 5 there. Receiving the ball in the air is Amari Cooper of the Dallas Cowboys with 886 yards. DJ Chark Jr. of Jacksonville at 794. Nicole Hardman of the Kansas City Chiefs is 754. A.J. Brown of the Tennessee Titans at 676 yards. And finishing out the top 5 is Miami Dolphins, I believe, tight end Mike Gesicki. Hopefully I didn't chop that too bad. 604 receiving yards in the air, finishing the offensive player stats in the Apex Madden League. Moving over to defense, leading the way with tackles is Demarius Randall of Cleveland with 31. Bobby Okiki with Indianapolis, probably chopped that up, 29. He's tied with Levante David of Tampa Bay Buccaneers with 29 as well. Bradley McDougall of Seattle Seahawks has 27. I'm probably chopping these names up. I don't give a shit. Leighton Vander Esch of the Dallas Cowboys with 25, finishing the top 5 guys with tackles in the Apex Madden League. Who is sacking the quarterback the most? Well, that's Joey Bosa with the Chargers. He's got 17 on the year. Behind him is Aaron Donald of the Rams with 15. Montez Sweat of the Redskins with 12. Leighton Vander Esch of the Dallas Cowboys with 11. And finishing the top 5 is Von Miller in Denver with 10. Interceptions, Jayon Brown of Tennessee has 6. He's tied with Troy Apke of Washington with 6 and Eric Berry of Jacksonville with 6. Then you have Adoree Jackson of Tennessee Titans and Byron Jones of the Dallas Cowboys, both each having 5. That's finishing up interceptions and also finishing up the player stat leaders in the Apex Madden League. Next, we're going to move on to the rookies in the Apex Madden League and talk about who is doing it up for the rookies. That's next. All right, moving on to the rookie stat leaders in the Apex Madden League, and this one is usually more of the higher ones, is the offensive side of the ball, as the passing. Dwayne Haskins Jr. of Washington Redskins is at 1,874. Mentioned before, of course, one of the top 5 players in the league with those yards. Kyler Murray behind him of the Arizona Cardinals at 1,447. Drew Lock of the Denver Broncos at 1,355. Gardner Minshew II of Jacksonville with 1,067. And then Daniel Jones of the New York Football Giants at 856. Running the ball on the ground, leading the rookies is Justin Hill of the Baltimore Ravens at 524. Devin Singletary of the Buffalo Bills at 363 yards. Josh Jacobs of the Oakland Raiders at 305. Darnell Henderson Jr. of the Rams at 301. And Alexander Madison of Minnesota at 260. Receiving rookies is Mecole Hardman of the Kansas City Chiefs, 754. He was also mentioned in the top 5 players earlier today on the podcast. A.J. Brown of Tennessee at 676. Terry McLaurin of the Washington Redskins at 535. Marquise Brown of the Baltimore Ravens at 396. Andy Isabella, most recently traded, 376 yards receiving. Leading the tackles, moving over to the defensive side of the ball, rookies with the most tackles is Bobby Okereke, which I mentioned earlier, probably chopped his name, with 29. Devin Bush of the Pittsburgh Steelers with 25. Drew Tranquill of the Chargers with 24. And then tied with 23 is Juan Thornhill of Kansas City Chiefs and Devin White of the Buccaneers down in Tampa, both having 23. Leading the way in rookies with sacks is Washington's Montez Sweat with 12. Brian Burns of the Carolina Panthers with 8. Max Crosby of the Oakland Raiders with 6. Quinnen Williams of the New York Jets with 5. And Drew Tranquill of the Chargers with 4. Interceptions leading the way is Blake Cashman, a linebacker with the New York Jets, having 3. Nasir Adderley of the Chargers with 3. Trayvon Mullen of the Oakland Raiders with 2. Justin Hollis of the Denver Broncos, and Jalili Tavi with Detroit Lions, probably screwed that up. They both have 2 interceptions for the rookies. So that takes care of the rookie stat leaders here in the Apex Madden League. We're going to go ahead and talk about the standings around the league next. All right, now that we got all of the stats out of the way, let's talk about the standings in the Apex Madden League. As I mentioned earlier, if you didn't catch it, we're moving into Week 8. We're moving into the trade deadline halfway through the season. Things are moving quite quickly, quite well, as I would say. So right now, we're about to advance into Week 8 coming tonight, Wednesday night into Thursday. So we'll start with the AFC, and then we'll move to the NFC. And starting in the AFC East, leading the way in that division is the Patriots at 4-2 right now. Behind them is the Dolphins at 3-3. The Bills are at 3-3, and the Jets are at 2-3. So a lot to be determined, as there's still some games to be played this week, Week 7. And that division is still quite, anyone could win that division, I still think, currently right now, as the way it stands. So moving out west to the AFC West, the Chargers leading that division at 5-2. Behind them is the Chiefs, who are 4-2. Then you have the Broncos that are 4-3 under new management, and the Raiders at 1-5. So there's about a 3-way ploy there for the leader of that division in the AFC West between the Chargers, Chiefs, and Broncos as it stands right now. We're only halfway through. Still a possibility for them Raiders to pull through, but AFC North, we have the Ravens leading the way at 4-1. The Bengals are 5-2. The Steelers are 2-4, and the Browns are 2-4. So right now, as it stands, that division is holding its load with the Ravens and the Bengals. That could be a close matchup to watch in those division games there. And then moving down to the South is the AFC South with the Jaguars, who are 6-1. Then you have the Titans, who are 4-3. The Texans, who are 3-4, and the Colts, who are 1-5. Texans still have a shot currently, in my opinion, right now, and so do the Colts. I mean, you never know what could happen, but Jaguars are kind of running away with that one right now with the Titans behind them. So moving over to the NFC, and where do we stand with, well, it's a lot of undefeated teams, almost one in every division, and starting with the NFC East is the Redskins, who are 7-0 currently. Then you have the Cowboys, who are 3-4, the Giants 2-4, and the Eagles 2-5. So right now, as it stands, it looks like that's the Redskins division to lose. NFC West, is the Rams leading the way at 6-0. Behind them is the Cardinals at 1-5, the Seahawks at 1-5, and the Niners at 1-5. They're another one running away with that division as far as I can tell. It's their division to lose. NFC North, the Packers leading the way at 7-0, the Vikings at 5-2, the Lions at 4-2, and the Bears at 1-5. That still has potential for the Lions and Vikings. As it stands, the Packers are leading that division, and it is theirs to lose. The NFC South, and finishing up the standings for the Apex Madden League, this is a tight one here amongst 3 teams. You have the Buccaneers at 3-3, the Panthers at 3-3, the Falcons at 2-4, and the Saints at 0-7. Currently, the Saints are the only winless team in the league, currently as it stands right now. They still have a shot. It's only halfway through. They could come back and win 8 games and still win that division, and it's very quite possible with the Buccaneers and Panthers both tied at 3-3 and the Falcons at 2-4. So that takes care of the Apex Madden League standings as it stands right now. As I said, moving from Week 7 to Week 8. So next up on the agenda, we'll go ahead and talk a little bit about the power rankings and how they stand right now in the league. All right, next on to the power rankings. This isn't our true in-house resident power rankings, Zephyr. This is going to be the generic Daddy Leagues rankings. I made up a slide here this morning. If you're watching, you could probably see that. So you probably already see who's 1 through 32 with the standings and such. So wasn't really sure how I was going to do it, but considering right now, I think what I would like to do is we're going to go ahead and start at the bottom to the top. And we're going to start who is ranked in at number 32, and that is the New Orleans Saints at 0-7. The Bears are at 31 at 1-5. Also with the Seattle Seahawks at 30, the Arizona Cardinals at 29, the Oakland Raiders at 28, San Francisco 49ers at 27, and the Indianapolis Colts at 26 all share the same record at 1-5. In at number 25 is the Falcons at 2-4, the Houston Texans at 24 at 3-4, Pittsburgh Steelers at 23, they're 2-4. In at 22 is the Cleveland Browns at 2-4, and in at 21 is the Philadelphia Eagles at 2-5. So here we go into the top 20 now. In at 20 is the New York Football Giants at 2-4. At number 19 is the Dallas Cowboys at 3-4. The New York Jets at 18 at 2-3. Miami Dolphins evened up at 3-3. In at number 17. And then you have the Tennessee Titans at 16 at 4-3. The Broncos at 4-3 at 15. The Carolina Panthers also 3-3 and at number 14. The Buccaneers are 3-3. They're at 13. Detroit Lions are 4-2, sitting at number 12 in the power rankings. The Buffalo Bills are 3-3. They're sitting at just outside the top 10 at number 11. So moving into the top 10 now, number 10 is the New England Patriots at 4-2. The Baltimore Ravens at 9 at 4-1. The Kansas City Chiefs at 8, they're 4-2. The Cincinnati Bengals sit 7th at 5-2, and then the Jacksonville Jaguars at 6th at 6-1. So moving into the top 5 now, you have the Minnesota Vikings at 5, who are 5-2. A surprising Washington Redskins, who are undefeated, sitting in the rankings at number 4. The Los Angeles Rams at 6-0 at number 3. The Los Angeles Chargers, who are 5-2, are sitting at number 2 on the power rankings currently. And number 1 is the undefeated Green Bay Packers at 7-0. They are the number 1 power ranked team according to Daddy Leagues. Let's not forget. Now, in-house, we'll try to have one to you in about 2 weeks on the next podcast here for the franchise for the Apex Madden League, only on the Xbox One. But what's interesting is the Washington Redskins at 7-1 sit 4th. Now, their current rating is 14.732, and that explains maybe why, because their strength of schedule and the teams that they played have been a little bit less than those teams above them, according to the stats and records right now. But by no means don't count out those Redskins. I mean, shockingly enough, the Chargers are 5-2, and their rating is 18.45. So I don't know what the algorithm is at Daddy Leagues. It's always been a controversy between this and those who do it in-house. Everyone puts the 7-0, 6-0 teams there, but I think the Rams haven't played yet, or they might have had the bye. I don't think they've had a bye yet. I'm not sure, but an undefeated team, 2 undefeated teams sit below a 5-2 team. And then you have the Vikings at top 5, who are 5-2. Leaves room for debate. Should be a hot topic in the chat later on talking about this. Next, we're going to go ahead and move on to the Apex Prime game last night that was broadcasted. And again, shout out to Alpha Hill 7 doing a great job, as he is the one-man show, the one-man band, whatever you want to call it. He's doing it all. He's behind the scenes. He's in front of the camera. He's doing the production. Great job, Alpha. Appreciate it. I want to help you out with that. You know that. So we'll go ahead and talk about that next. All right, so next up, we're going to call this next segment, what I'm going to try to do, we're going to call it the Huddle. It used to be an old podcast name of mine. But we're going to go in depth with the game that was broadcasted the previous night on the Wednesdays in which I do the podcast. So within the Huddle, we're going to talk about, on the Apex Sports Network, Apex Prime Live, Jaguars versus the Bengals last night. If you didn't tune in, it was a back-and-forth game. It wasn't looking good up front for the Bengals. A lot of talking going on before that game. Bengals fell short 23-16. So we'll go ahead and go right into the stats. We'll go ahead and take a look at the game summary. Jacksonville Jaguars and Minshew was 8 of 22 with 190 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Fournette had 19 carries for 43 yards and no TDs. Chark Jr. had 4 receptions, 102 yards. He had one of the 2 touchdowns for the Jaguars offense. And on defense, Smith had 3 tackles and an interception. Now, the Bengals side of the ball, they started Dalton early, pulled him out of the game. We'll get to those stats in a minute. But Jackson comes in and goes 4 of 8, 60 yards, 2 touchdowns. He also throws 2 picks. Mixon had 14 carries for 62 yards and no touchdowns. Battle of the run game was won by Mixon in less carries and 20 more yards or so. Boyd had 2 receptions for only 34 yards, one in which was a touchdown. And Evans had 4 tackles. So let's go ahead and get to the team stats. Actually, no, let's talk about the player stats. Forget the team stats. We'll go right into the player stats. And let's go ahead and look at the Bengals side who were hosting this game. Andy Dalton was 5 of 9. He had 50 yards, and he threw 3 interceptions. Now, Booker pulled him early. I believe it was around the second quarter maybe he pulled him, and he put in his man Jackson. Jackson did well. He also threw 2 picks. He also had 2 touchdowns, threw for 60 yards, and was 4 of 8. Tyree Jackson, he did his job. He's a 21-year-old kid, normal development. He's a rookie. He's 6'7", 250 pounds. I mean, the guy is technically a linebacker or a defensive end. Now, on the Jaguars side of the ball passing, Minshew was 8 of 22, as mentioned, 190 yards, 2 TDs, and 1 interception. Fournette carried it 19 times for 43 yards. Minshew had 3 attempts for 11 yards, his longest run being 6. Fournette's longest was 12. Dobbs tried to run it one time, but lost a yard. Receiving-wise for the Bengals, Boyd had 2 receptions for 34 yards. He had one of the 2 touchdowns, one of them 24 yards, the longest. A.J. Green had 1 reception for 16 yards, which was his touchdown. Ross had 4 receptions for 48 yards. His longest was 23. Eifert had 1 catch for 7 yards, and Williams had 1 catch for 5 yards. Receiving for the Jaguars, Chark leading the way with 4 receptions, 102 yards, a touchdown, 38 yards was his longest of the day. Fournette, who didn't get the ball on the ground much, he got the 4 receptions for only 16 yards, but one of those touchdowns was his longest, was 9 yards. O'Shaughnessy had 3 receptions for 21 yards. Cole and Armstead both had a reception, each for about 20 yards each. And then Lee had 5 receptions for 12 yards. Moving on to the defensive side of the ball, leading the way, for the Bengals defense, Evans had 4 tackles, Bates had 4 tackles, Jackson had a tackle and an interception, Pratt had 4 tackles, a forced fumble from Hubbard, 3 tackles by Phillips, Virgil, Martinez, one of the newly acquired linebackers for the Bengals. He came up big in a goal line situation last night. Williams and Dennard had 2. Atkins, Lawson, and Billings all had 1. Defensively for the Jaguars, leading the way was Smith with 3 tackles. He had 1 interception. Berry had 2 tackles with an interception. Harrison had a tackle with an interception. Nickerson had a tackle for an interception. Another interception went to Boyle. I think Minshew's grandma had an interception. No, just kidding. Don't be mad at me, Booker. Jack had 2 tackles. He also had a sack. We mentioned Boye had an interception, if I'm saying his name right. Anyway, Campbell had 3 tackles. Hayden had 2 tackles. Davis and Williams each had a tackle. So let's go back and take a look at the team stats in this one. Passing yards allowed for the Jaguars, 102. The Bengals gave up almost 200 yards in the air. They gave up 190. 65 yards allowed on the ground by the Jaguars, only 53 for the Bengals. 1 defensive sack by the Jaguars in this one. Passing yards allowed, as we mentioned, 190, 102 for the Bengals. Rushing yards, 53 and 65. Red zone percentage, the Jaguars were at 100. The Bengals were at 80. Offensively reversed, 80 and 100. Third down, 45% for the Jags, 40% for the Bengals. 5 turnovers was the key in this one for the Bengals, 2 for the Jaguars. Reversed that, 5 and 2 on takeaways. Penalties, 2 for the Jags and 1 for the Bengals. So Next time, hope to get some highlights for you guys on those games of some of the key plays, as some of the guys we've mentioned here with the stat leaders and such. Both these teams were 5-1 going into this game. The Jaguars come out with the win, 23-16 on Apex Prime. They're now 6-1. The Bengals are 5-2. And as we showed you earlier, which was the power rankings, this game was pretty important because the Jags sit above the Bengals now at 6-1, and the Bengals at 5-2. So, it was a close game. Booker almost came back on that one. And shout out to the Jaguars owner. Not sure how to go with that name, but RK Weefy. Hopefully I didn't chop your name, buddy. But all in all, great job last night, guys, by everyone in attendance for showing up. Alpha for the production, and, of course, the two teams that took to the field and gave us a good game to watch. So next up on the show, we're just going to go ahead and call it quits here in just a minute. We'll be right back. All right, guys, so I hope you enjoyed the show this week. Trying to do it bi-weekly, as I mentioned. This is the second episode of the franchise podcast, only for the Apex Madden League on Xbox One. We're currently moving into the week 8 of our first season, as the schedule was just posted. So go ahead and get those games scheduled. We're moving at a great pace. Also want to mention to, just make sure you know the rules and such, and keep it clean, things like that. So just keep the pace going, guys. Keep the involvement. Keep the excitement going. I enjoy doing this. I feed off that energy. Also want to make a quick little thing. Put those highlights. If you need help with the clips, reach out to us. Just get the clips in there. If that's all you can do. We'll take care of the rest as far as the highlights. Some of the guys in here want to do that. So happy to be here, guys. Happy to do this stuff. I hope you guys enjoyed episode 2. That's all I got, and I'm out.